How can we ensure that new real estate development benefits the whole community? Hi, I'm Rick Jacobus. I'm a consultant working with the City of Berkeley to plan for new housing at the Ashby and North Berkeley BART stations. This is the third in a three-part series of videos designed to provide background information about how market rate and affordable housing development works to help people participate in the decisions about the future of the BART stations. This video focuses on the mechanisms through which the public shares in the value created by new real estate development. We'll talk about the idea of public value recapture and look at examples of how it's practiced by the City of Berkeley and by BART. Many people are concerned that building high-cost housing will push up the cost of nearby housing and result in gentrification. There's been a lot of research on this question over the past 5 years, and so far the data seems to be suggesting that outside of a handful of sensitive locations, building more housing helps bring costs down more than it pushes them up, even where the new housing is really expensive. The reason for this is that it's the presence of high-paying jobs that's driving high housing costs in places like the Bay Area. The workers who take those jobs are going to live somewhere, and unfortunately, their high incomes mean that they can outbid everyone else for limited housing in our neighborhoods. Building new housing, even high-cost housing, gives those people somewhere to go so that there's less pressure on the rents in our existing neighborhood housing stock. So it makes sense to think hard about where we put it, but if we don't put new housing somewhere, we end up with more, not less, gentrification. So new housing benefits everyone to some degree because it helps keep the rents from rising even faster. But it benefits some people a lot more than others. High-income workers who are looking for new housing obviously benefit when we build new housing that they alone can afford to live in. But builders of housing obviously benefit also from the opportunity to build. But when we accept that we need to make room for more housing development and change our land use policies to make it possible, perhaps the group that benefits the most is the people who own land. Whatever you think of developers, they work hard and take risks for their money. Landowners, on the other hand, often sit back and realize very significant windfalls. This is because what you're able to build on your land is something we determine together through rules known as zoning. Zoning influences development. It can set standards about, for example, maximum building sizes or heights, but individual property owners still decide what and if they want to build on a property. Because land is individually owned, when we collectively change the rules, individual owners can see the value of their land go up a lot without any effort on their part. Here's an extreme example. Sparkling wine can be made all over the world, but only wine from one region in France can call itself champagne. Just being from that region makes your farmland more valuable. So when the French government decided to expand the boundary of the region, some landowners saw the value of their farmland increase to more than 100 times what it was worth before, just because the government changed the map. The most common way we increase the value of privately owned land is by increasing the allowable development intensity. As we go from rural areas to the center of our cities, we change the rules about how many housing units per acre are allowed, or how many stories tall each building can be. Rents have been rising because we've not been building enough housing. If we want to build more housing, we have to allow development intensity in more places. When we do this, we automatically make the land in those places more valuable. Rather than see all of that value go into the pockets of a lucky few landowners, many cities develop policies and programs that seek to share some of that increase in land value more widely so that it can help people who otherwise might not benefit. We call those policies public value recapture because they recapture some of this increase in land value and use it to fund community benefits. Here's an example that makes the idea easier to understand. Emeryville offers developers the option of building bigger and taller buildings, but only if they provide community benefits from a city menu. For example, a project can build just what's allowed by the current zoning without providing any additional benefits. Or they can build a taller project if they agree to include affordable housing and pay for open space improvements. By allowing the builder to build taller in this case, the city is effectively increasing the value of the land. But Emeryville recaptures some of that increase in value by requiring community benefits. The land is still worth more, it's just not worth as much more as it would be if they could build higher without providing the additional public benefits. Similarly, they allow additional density for buildings that include larger family-friendly units and zero net energy buildings with solar panels and efficient building systems. And they offer additional density for completing public infrastructure and a host of other benefits. In general, the program requires more community benefits from projects that build more housing units. Essentially, Emeryville is capturing a portion of the increase in value that would occur as a result of allowing denser development, and at the same time encouraging the type of development that they want to see. When we change the planning rules to allow more development, it's generally landowners, not builders, who receive the windfall. And when we add new requirements like affordable housing or open space, it's again landowners who end up paying for this in the form of lower land prices. This idea is known as residual land value. It's the notion that the value of land is simply whatever's left over after you pay for everything else. If buildings are worth a lot more than they cost to build, there's a lot of money left over and landowners will charge more for land. One implication of this idea is that it's possible for the public to fund community benefits through public value recapture. To some extent, landowners are stuck with whatever this residual land value is. They can't move their land to another jurisdiction. But if we attempt to recapture too much, they can decide not to sell their land, and then nothing gets built. Here's a real-world example of residual land value. 1951 Shattuck is a proposed project in Berkeley, and the city required the developer to compare the normally allowed 75-foot mid-rise building and the proposed 120-foot high-rise. They found that a mid-rise building could pay $8 million for land, while a high-rise at that location would be significantly more profitable, allowing payment of more than $14 million for the land. By allowing the increase in height, the city would be essentially increasing the value of the land by $6.5 million. This only works out this way because it's a very high rent location. In a less expensive location, the high-rise would be less valuable because it costs so much more to build. Berkeley has its own system of public value recapture in place. It's a little more complicated than Emeryville's, but it achieves the same result, and it goes even a couple steps further. The primary tool the city of Berkeley uses to recapture land value for public benefit is impact fees. The largest of these fees is the Affordable Housing Mitigation Fee. Economists have found that these impact fees hold down the value of developable land. Because developers have to pay these fees, they have less money left over to pay for land. So for example, for 1951 Shattuck, the previous slide showed that allowing a taller building created an extra $6.5 million in value. But Berkeley was able to capture a total of $11.6 million in community benefits from this proposed project. The reason Berkeley can capture more land value than the increase is that, unlike Emeryville, Berkeley captures a share of land value whether or not you ask for the right to build higher. Berkeley's rules recapture value that was conferred to landowners through zoning decisions decades in the past, not just increases authorized today. Berkeley's community benefit fees right now are some of the highest in the region, even though its market isn't as strong as places like downtown Oakland. It's very difficult to know how high these fees can be before they're too high for new projects to pay them. When that happens, nothing gets built. Like other cities, Berkeley also recaptures public value in other ways as well. For example, through labor agreements on certain projects. If a builder is using union labor anyway, these requirements can add a small cost. But for some projects, requiring the general contractor to only hire union subcontractors can add 10 to 15% to the cost of a new building. This requirement reduces the value of the underlying land because there's less money left over. In essence, these requirements transfer some of the land value to subcontractors and their union employees. Just like the city of Berkeley, BART has community benefit requirements for projects like the Berkeley BART Stations. As part of the selection process for developers to build on its land, BART has frequently required a range of community benefits, including affordable housing, open space improvements, construction of public parking spaces, and other physical infrastructure improvements. Also, BART consistently requires labor agreements which ensure union labor on construction projects. But notice something interesting here. Instead of reducing the value of someone else's land, these requirements all reduce the amount of money BART receives for its own land. In the case of affordable housing, BART has very specific requirements with clear implications for land value. The BART board adopted transit-oriented development guidelines which require affordable housing in every station area. The minimum requirement is 20% affordable housing. Setting that 20% affordable requirement has the effect of reducing the fair market value of BART's land. But they've set a more ambitious goal of 35% affordable housing on BART land across the whole system. In order to reach that goal, Their TOD policy allows BART to reduce land values by 30% for projects that include at least 35% affordable units, and up to 60% for projects that also serve very low-income residents. In fact, BART only ever receives actual money for about a third of the value of the land that it owns. In addition to affordable housing, BART sometimes requires developers to build replacement public parking or other expensive station improvements. All of these requirements reduce the value that they could receive for their land. But even the money that they do receive in lease payments can easily be described as providing a critical community benefit because it's used to fund the operation of the public transit system. As we consider plans for the development at the Ashby and North Berkeley BART stations, the goal is to design projects that ensure that the majority of the benefit of redevelopment flows to the public. But because there's more than one kind of benefit that's important, every potential alternative will require a complex balancing act between multiple public benefits. Thank you for listening.